Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Taking a Break with Gen X Jace and Boomer 2. We're recorded here on a Sunday morning. I don't really have much football to watch because my Texas Longhorns suck and my Dallas Cowboys suck. So let's talk some entertainment. Mike, how you doing?
Good. I've got to watch the Vikings, and they kind of suck too. So it's a pretty sucky day. A lot of suckage today. So let's talk about some pleasant things. And while you're bringing up football, um, I was watching an interview where some Fox News person was talking to one of the owners of the Dallas Cowboys. Her name was Jones,
Jerry
presumably
Jones. Jerry Jones' wife.
related. Is it his wife? Well, she looked young and pretty, and he was 100, so maybe it is his wife. But the Fox News person asked her about Bad Bunny and how she must be disappointed that Bad Bunny, and this woman just very nicely put her in her place, and it was good to see. It was a very smart PR move from this Miss Jones responding to the Fox News host, and she didn't know what the fuck to do. I mean, the whole idea who's going to be in the halftime at the Super Bowl. I'm not even sure why that's a big deal. It's like an 8 minute thing. It's not that big a deal. A lot of people are watching, and there's been some shitty ones out there, but everybody's upset about Bad Bunny except me. I don't know any one of his songs, and I could give a fuck if he's at halftime. He seems like a funny, nice guy when I saw him in the movie, and I've seen him on Saturday Night Live. He's cool as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Bad Bunny, I don't know much about him either, but you know who does? The
Who?
younger viewers who
Oh
aren't
yeah.
probably invested in football. I don't know much about it was actually Stephen Miller's wife. So that tells you anything right there to do it. Yeah, he was
Oh, that's
NFL.
right. It was Stephen Miller's wife. Yeah.
It was Stephen Miller's wife. And and we both know that it was Charlotte Jones, co-owner Charlotte Jones. And we know Jerry Jones is a big Trumper. He supports Trump, of course, because he's a
Yeah.
billionaire, you know. And but what the NFL's got to be careful of is that them losing the audience because there's a demographic called 18 to 34 that you know this in radio that is like the
Uh,
gold standard.
Right.
And I'm past 34. You're past
I'm a
34.
little I'm a little past, yeah.
And yeah, and we both know who the greatest Super Bowl halftime performance was, and that's Prince. I think we both can agree on that. That was
Yeah,
probably,
I there might be some people that will argue with us, and I might be biased because I live in Minnesota. But if you look at the halftime shows, Prince, uh, even beyond the Janet Jackson flashing, I still think Prince was better.
yeah, Michael Jackson was pretty good. Whitney Houston was pretty good. But you got to look at the kind of artist. It's kind of like these old men that like you see these girls like the Kardashians and they'll wear like an Iron Maiden shirt or a Slayer shirt. You know fucking well Kim Kardashian doesn't know who the fuck Iron Maiden is.
Absolutely.
That wear these shirts. And you have these older men yelling, "Oh my God, name a song!" And it's they're like the same people that they want Metallica to play. I'd love Metallica to play, and they probably could still play. But they're not going for that Metallica crowd. They're going for the younger crowd. And Bad Bunny, I don't know much about his music, but I still watch wrestling. He actually is from Puerto Rico, and he actually did some wrestling. He's pretty damn good. I mean, when I see these celebrities that go out there, I mean, call it fake or whatever, but they still got to know their craft.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not a fan of his music. It's kind of like Taylor Swift. I'm not a fan of the music, but I'm a fan of the person.
Right.
So, and I heard him, and of course, he's going, and it's like these people that are upset about that, they usually wear red hats. We both know that. And they're usually upset
Yeah.
about it. So that's why it was great to see her, clap back on, she got clapped back a couple of times. There's a couple of times she's been clapped back on, Stephen Miller's wife. So it's like, it, I, I don't understand the racism stuff, especially in Texas. I guarantee you that most of the Cowboys fans in attendance are Mexican because the Mexican community has taken over Texas.
I,
And
I think I heard somebody say that the In terms of percentages, the Dallas Cowboys audience is at least 45% uh, Hispanic,
Yeah.
which tells you something. Don't piss them off.
Yeah, and that's but the way a lot of them they look at, I hate to say this, but she was looking at I mean, we know what's going on in the news with ICE, that they're arresting regular people for the way they look. And
Yeah.
if you deny that, you're full of shit. And they look at somebody from Puerto Rico, it's the same guy as they look for, an undocumented guy from Mexico. There's no difference to them. They're not white. But if you can, there's a song by Steven Tyler and Aerosmith called "Living on the Edge." If you can tell a wise man by the color of his skin, you're a better man than me. You know more than I do. I mean, it's just racism, and it's just like politics has to be in everything. I mean, it's a Bad Bunny show. A couple years ago, they had the hip hop. They had Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. I mean, is that my thing? No. But it's obviously was a big ratings get. There's obviously an audience for it. Not everything is about you.
Well, exactly. And the thing about it is the NFL is doing what the Republican Party should be doing. They're realizing that the boomers are starting to die off. The Gen X are getting older. The future is millennials and Gen Zs, and you got to start appealing to them if you want them to continue to consume whatever it is you're selling. NFL being football, and of course, politicians, Republicans being politicians. So you've got to start appealing to those different crowds. They've stuck with the boomers so long that they've forgotten that they have to adjust as things go. The Republicans haven't got it as yet. They're, as many people as there are Hispanic that may have voted for Republicans, they're shitting on them. They're deporting them. They're starving them. They're kicking them out of jobs. They haven't grasped a look at the future yet because they're killing themselves in the process. And NFL, you have to give them credit. They're smart enough to know better.
Yeah, I think they even asked Roger Goodell about that. I think, they were saying, they wanted, I love George Strait. He lives right down the street from, or one of his houses is right down the street from me, let's say. But there was a petition to put him at the halftime show. No offense to George Strait, but if you did that, more than half the country would turn off because they don't like country music.
Yeah.
And there's a demo that people that don't like country music, especially an older guy. And there's no, like I said, no offense to George Strait, maybe 20 years ago, a little bit something like that. But it's like everybody has had their time. We were talking about Prince, we're talking about Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson. Those are the older artists. You know, they had who they have on a couple years ago, moves like Jagger. What was the Maroon 5?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just heard about how horrible it was. I didn't think it was that bad. I'll watch it, but it's not. I don't have to uproot my life for the fucking halftime show. You know what I mean? The NFL knows what it's doing. They market stuff. I mean, Bad Bunny's huge. They had him here. He played here at the Alamo Dome. That thing's a stadium, and fucking people were lining. And I was like, and being the Gen Xer, I was like, who the hell is Bad Bunny? You know what I mean? But obviously, people younger than me, and, the boomers are dying out, and Gen X is not as big as the boomers were, or the ones behind us. We're kind of the middle generation, and we're dying out too.
Yeah.
So it's the younger crowd they got to focus on, and the NFL is doing the right thing.
Well, I saw a video on YouTube that struck me funny, and it's how things progress and how things change over the years. And I saw a video of the halftime show in like I don't know if it was the first Super Bowl or the first NFL championship. And what it amounted to is a bunch of cheerleaders in 60s era cheerleaders with pom poms out on the field, and somebody clearly taking a microphone and putting it up to a record player so they could play the music, and they're just dancing around as cheerleaders do. And they're ranting about it. Oh, look at the cheerleaders halftime at the Super. And then you go from that to the high tech of Prince or some of the other things we've seen. It's amazing how things have progressed. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. I grew up in the 60s. We're now in the 2020s. There's been a progression with music, not only how it's made, how it's distributed, and how it sounds, really. From the time you were a young kid, maybe in your single digits or teens to now, how would you compare music then to now?
I compare music then as more authentic, more real, more not as much as I don't know. I'm a fan of the mistakes on albums, like
Yeah.
when you hear it, when you can hear like there's a song called "Chip Away at the Stone" by Aerosmith, and it's Joe Perry, playing that guitar, and like if it would have been now, you can hear the fingers on the guitar strings like go back and
Right.
forth. I mean, there's a lot of things now, it's got to sound real crisp. You can't have those mistakes anymore. It just seems to me is like you have some bands that, they try to go back and do that, but it's gotten so polished now that I can't even listen to new music. I mean, it's when I listen to it, it doesn't sound real to me. The voice are manufactured. I mean, it's not probably a lot of it's not quite AI yet, but I don't know. I like the old kind of, got a single guitar, that's why I think Unplugged was so good because I think that, that was, live. And I think if you're not good live and you're just a manufactured artist, and I think there's a lot of that, and that's in pop and country stuff I really don't listen to anymore.
There are, you go back to the Beatles, Elvis, that kind of era. Um, they would literally stand the person or the band in a room, press a record button, and record everything on two tracks all together at once. And that had its problems because the drum might be too loud or the guitar may not be loud enough. So then they created the multi-track recording. What a lot of people don't know is, who invented multi-track? It was a guitarist, Les Paul, Les Paul and Mary Ford. He invented a lot of things regarding the guitars, but he invented multi-track recording. And for those people that don't know what multi-track recording is, because some people don't, um, it basically allows you to record different components on different tracks so you don't have bleed over from the other instruments into the instruments you're recording. So when you were recording um, back in the day with two tracks, you'd have the drum pounding away and the bass guitar and all this stuff. You'd have to try to balance it as if it were a show. And then you really had no flexibility with it. So now what happens, you can go in and record the drums separately, then record a bass track, then record a guitar track, then record vocals and backing vocals. And that gives you the flexibility to adjust all of them to make them sound perfect. Uh, and even in the 70s and 80s, when they were doing that, I think it cost music a little something in terms of authenticity or soul. I mean, there was something about the Beatles, Elvis, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, just standing in front of a microphone and playing. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it had an impact.
Yeah, because you got I remember back in the day, like, there were bands, I mean, they would release maybe two, three albums sometimes in one year. Then the production got bigger like in the 80s, and then it would be like every couple of years. One example of that is Kiss. I read that like in 74, 73, 74, they released like their first three albums.
Right,
I mean, they had like 19 albums in their first 20 years. I mean, now, and a lot of them would just, they would play live in the studio and that would be the album. Like, I mean,
right,
you can hear the old Elvis stuff, that's live. You can hear some of the old Stones, and it's just, I don't know. I think you're right about that, that, it seems like especially it probably, really hit the zenith in the 80s.
right,
Um, there's a band called Def Leppard that they were a rock band, and they released an album in the 80s called Hysteria, which was like they were a rock band, but that was so produced with like keyboards, and it took them like 4 years to make that album. I mean, it freaking sold 20 million copies. I mean, it is still, but I don't know. I think a lot of times bands lose focus of the music and they focus more on the production.
right,
And I think that, you got somebody like the Black Crowes. I mean, they want to be the faces with Rod Stewart. That's who they want to be. And they record like they did back in the old days. I mean, and I think that there's an audience for that. But I think that especially as artists get older, there's more production. I mean, I think that, the Stones did an album a couple years ago. I mean, and if that would have been probably released 30 years ago, it would probably been a big hit. But, albums seem so throwaway nowadays that, it seems like people don't buy music anymore.
Yeah, in the 80s, when I was in a studio and I owned a studio, that's when sampling first came around. You always had the effects on sound or reverb, delay, and all that kind of stuff. But in the 80s, that sampling came around where you could sample different sounds. You could sample, I remember it was in the early days of sampling, and they had like an orchestra hit, just a hit. You could sample a couple background voices, multiply them by about 100 times, and you got this big backup thing. It does take away from the realism. It seems more manufactured. And there are different kinds of musicians. Some people want the raw goodness of the song, but some of these musicians got into it where everything's got to be perfect. Everything's got to be absolutely perfect. And if I listen to my favorite songs, I don't think they're the ones that are perfect. Um, I think we have lost a little soul. Like I think I asked this to you before. I was seeing Bob Seger 40 years after he was famous and watching his concerts and still loving his concerts. And I'm trying to pick out artists today that will be around 40 years from now. I mean, I won't be around 40 years from now. And I don't know if it's just old guy me talking that my music is better, or like you say, the music seems more throwaway at this point.
I think a Taylor Swift will be around because she's
Yeah,
authentic. She writes her own songs. I think country will be around. I don't know if, like
some country,
some
because
country.
there's really fabricated country too.
Yeah, but as far as rock and roll, you have two bands that are pretty good. One's called Greta Van Fleet, and they're like
Yeah,
a Led Zeppelin ripoff. And you have the Struts. What do they sound like? They sound like Queen. There's
yeah,
nothing authentic about rock and roll anymore. And I think that's why the Paul McCartneys, the Rolling Stones, the Kisses, the Aerosmiths lasted so long is because in my generation in the 90s, there's a void because
yeah,
you have some great bands like Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Nirvana that should be still touring right now, but they're all dead. The lead
yeah,
singers are all dead. That's one thing about grunge. It was depressing when it first came out. Then it got more angry to develop more into metal. But 40 years, man, maybe Taylor Swift. I mean, she'll be pushing her 70s, but hell, Mick Jagger's still out there. So who knows? I would say probably Taylor.
well, that's a good point. When I was a teenager in the 70s, there was a big resurgence of nostalgia for the 50s. We had American Graffiti, we had Happy Days, we had a lot of 50s type music coming out. There were a lot of concerts, oldies concerts bouncing around all over the country. But here's the difference back then to now. And this is why I think the 70s and 80s probably had better music. In the 70s, you had these 50s concerts, but they weren't big concerts. They were in armories and theaters, and it would cost you $2 to get in. Oh, Chubby Checker and Dion and maybe a little Richard, they're coming out, and it would be cheap to get in. It would kind of be a half-ass concert. Okay. Now in the 2020s, you're looking at 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000 oldies who haven't had a hit in a long time. And they're having fucking major tours. They're making as much or more than the people that are popular today. So there has been a difference in how people receive um, nostalgic music, and that may be because of boomers, and there's so many of them.
Well, you talk about the 70s, how that was a resurgence of the 50s. I lived that too in the 90s
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, because there was the 90s. I mean, what did we have in the 90s? We had that 70s show come out.
Right.
We had one of the biggest things. I remember I was sitting there and I was a big Kiss fan. Like I said, I got into Kiss in the 80s when they didn't have the makeup on. I'm sitting there watching the Grammys one time and Tupac walks out and he goes, "Let's just shock the people." he brings out Kiss all in makeup again. I had no freaking clue they were back together. They did an unplugged together with the original guys, but they hit in '96. They did their reunion tour. They actually did the press conference on the Intrepid
Wow.
ship, and actually Conan O'Brien hosted it. But that was the biggest tour of '96, and they had a good run because everybody was hungry for the '70s. You had '70s movies come out. There's a great movie made down here in Austin, Texas called Dazed and Confused. It's
Oh,
about high
great
school.
movie.
You don't remember Dazed and Confused? It's got Matthew
I,
McConaughey.
motherfucker, I lived it. I
Yeah,
lived it. When I watched that movie, in spite of the fact that it was Texas and it was a little different, and I'm in Minnesota, they really captured the essence, the attitude, the vibe of the '70s. Because those guys in that movie were me and my friends in Minnesota of that same era, and it was pretty solid. It was pretty close.
yeah, that was like Matthew McConaughey's like first big role. Ben Affleck. I
Yeah.
mean, they had a lot of stars in that show, but it was made, of course, and I remember that coming out. And I love the soundtrack. I mean, you had Kiss, of course, ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Foghat. I mean, do you remember Foghat? I mean,
I
they're
grew up in
sitting
the '70s, motherfucker.
they're
Every
sitting there
dance I
driving.
went to had Slow Ride.
They're sitting there driving, high as fuck, driving down the road, going to Houston to get them Aerosmith tickets. I mean, I swear to God, Mike, I was born 10 years too late to her. I mean, I should have been in that generation, man. I should have been up there with living that because that's me. I mean, that's going to the moon tower, talking about, what got me is that who's that one stoner guy talking about how George Washington smoked pot, everybody smoked pot, it's a big conspiracy,
Well,
and it's
it's funny that guy who was the stoner, and I can't remember his name in the show. He ended up he's an adult now in top TV shows and stuff like that. He's just a regular guy now. But it had in the '70s you had
yeah,
the classes of people. You had the jocks, you had the burnouts, as we called them. You had
rockers.
the artsy people. You had all these names for people, and I never really fit in one category. I was kind of a jock, but I also got hammered a lot, so we kind of crossed over. But it was interesting watching that movie. I remember, I think I went with my wife or my girlfriend, who is now my wife at the time, and it was a great movie. It was an absolutely great movie, and it hit home a lot.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny is that a lot of those people that were all for smoking pot and everything, now they're the fucking ones making the laws to ban the shit. And when you would think a fucking generation that's gonna fucking legalize shit would have been the boomers. I mean, from the Grateful Dead to, Zeppelin, all that shit. But no, what are they doing? They're the stuffed shirt fucking suits now. Not you, of
You're
course, but
look if you're looking at boomers who grew up in the '60s, maybe 10 years older than I am, and you looked at them back then and the way the old people looked at them, you would think by the time they got to this age, there would be drinking and drugging and pot in the streets, people having sex on the park benches. It would have been fun. That's my greatest disappointment. I grew up in the '60s, but I was in the single digits, you know. I didn't hit my high school years until the late '70s. And that whole free love thing of the '60s, motherfucker, we could have used that in the '70s.
yeah, I mean, like you think you were born 10 years too early, too late, and I would think I was born 10 years too late. I mean, I don't know. I remember even growing up in the 80s. Um, 80s were great too as a kid. I think it really got I think in when it really got bad in the 90s is when we started having all these like school shootings and stuff like that. I think people were so much on edge because I remember in the 80s I would wear Spuds McKenzie shirts too. You remember Spuds McKenzie, the
Mhm.
the dog from the Bud Light thing? I would wear, and it wasn't that I was necessarily into beer, but I liked Spuds McKenzie. He was on, was it advertising towards kids? Fuck yeah, it was advertising towards kids. I mean, they had him in the commercials with all the chicks around, even though, quote unquote, hate to break your bubble, Spuds McKenzie was actually a female dog. But but I remember that in the Corona shirts. They
Uh-huh.
have something down here that It's a wax they put on surfboards called Big Johnson. So hey, and it's an entendre like, hey, it's my Big Johnson, and like, and people would, I mean, kids would wear Marlboro shirts. I mean, they had smoking sections. You remember that in fucking
Yeah.
school. You'd be out there
Oh, right
smoking with
out.
your counselor. I mean, and they really that kind of stopped when I got to school in like 86, 87. But you could still go off campus there and smoke. My God, you get busted with a cigarette now, you're fucking going to almost jail. I mean,
Yeah.
they wonder why kids are so fucking depressed. It's just like they're, and I mean, you gotta have, I mean, those parties too used to go to. Oh, there's like a three kegger. I have a buddy of mine that's a cop was telling me that this is a guy I partied with in high school, and he goes, "Yeah, you know what we do now? We have these kids that are in trouble, so we get them with a narc. So they narc on where our party's at, and we bust these kids, and they get a lighter sentence." I go, "Geez, dude, can you imagine that happened to us?" I mean, I think parents really lose sight of being a kid. I mean, you get, it's like when you start out poor, like these musicians, they get rich and famous,
Yeah.
and they start treating their fans like shit. They
Yeah.
forget where they fucking come from. And I think society's done that a lot to these kids. And it's kind of sucked to be a fucking kid nowadays, man.
It does. I've often said if millennials are pissed off at boomers and Gen Xers, they aren't pissed off about the right thing. Because when I think back to the 70s, we did. I think I was considered a pretty good kid, but only because I rarely got caught or there was no accountability. Partying in my neighborhood started when I was 13, 14. You'd have parties in a house. Mom and dad would be gone for the weekend and you'd have a party and kegs in the house. We lived right by the Mississippi River and they had these big hills that went down to the river bottoms. Having a river party was a fucking huge deal. We'd slide down the hill, drink, climb up, and fall down that hill multiple times before we ever got out of there. But um, we got away with a lot of shit. I was telling somebody recently that's when drinking and I'm not promoting this, but drinking and driving wasn't quite the thing it is now. I remember going from my house. I was going to go up to White Castle because I was hungry and I was drunk. So I got in my car and I'm racing down 42nd Avenue right by Riverview Theater. And I'm speeding and the cop pulls me over. The cop pulls me over, says, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "Well, fucking Saturday. Yeah. Yeah, I've been drinking." And, and he said, "Okay." He pulls out my card. He says, "It looks like you live about 4 blocks from here." I go, "Yeah, I do." He says, "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to leave this car right here, lock that fucker up, go home, go to bed, pick it up in the morning when you're sober. But if I come by here later and this thing's gone, I'm coming to your house and I'm dragging you out and taking you to jail." I said, "That's a deal. I'll take that." So I parked my car and walked the fuck home, and everything was cool. That would never happen today. And I'm not saying it should happen today, but that's what it was back in the 70s. Everything was a lot easier, and everybody would kind of go, "It's just kids fucking around." You don't get that anymore. And if the millennials should be mad at us, it should be that we had all the fun, we got away with everything, and then we clamped down when we got to be fucking adults.
Yeah, speaking of that, it reminds me of that part in Dazed and Confused where they're out there throwing those bowling balls at the fucking mailboxes, and that guy pulls up on him, and he's acting like he did a beer run, right? He fucking
Yeah.
guy's got the fucking gun in his face. Goes, "I paid for the beer, man." It's like, fucking getting the mailbox is a federal fucking offense, like this old farmer. It's like, yeah, and yeah, and I remember doing stupid shit. Like I remember one time, and I think it kind of when I did something stupid, I had these friends that I hung out with. I mean, they were delinquents, so to speak, and they would throw rocks or like stuff at cars driving by. And I thought that was cool for like 2 minutes until one time I lived down in the McAllen, so they had grapefruits. So I got a grapefruit and I threw it at a car. I hit the car on the side. The car kept going. It was a big old LTD, so nothing gonna happen. And I just sit there and I thought to myself, that's fucking stupid. And I was always somebody that, I would get into trouble, but I always was careful because it's like I mean, it's like I had friends that, they would steal golf carts in apartment complexes. My cousin did that. He ran into the pool. Well, they got busted for that shit. I fucking wouldn't do shit like that. Would I get drunk? Maybe. But I think a lot of it has to do with, I grew up around a bunch of Christians, nationalists, and their parents were so strict on them they couldn't drink or whatever. Most of them wound up as alcoholics, drug addicts, or whatever. My mom would say, if you're going to drink, drink here with me. And I've been drunk with my mom a couple times. She's cool about it. I don't have a problem drinking to this day. But I have alcoholism running my family. But I think that, you need to be a parent, but you also need to realize that, kids are human too. And, I don't know if I would have been a good parent or whatever like that, but I think that, it's just, when you sit there and you talk about the good old days, I mean, they were good because maybe they didn't have that parent that was hovering over them. Because a lot of that generation, especially from the greatest generation, I mean, they didn't show like a lot of like I've heard of like a lot of them say that they weren't like, like the caring parent that they lived through the depression, so they weren't exactly the most cuddling kind. Does that make sense? That
Yeah.
maybe they raised a generation that were like, well, maybe I'll be more hands off on my kid. Nowadays, it's like the parents want to be that kid's best friend and they just smother them. It's like
Yeah,
I didn't
you
have
can't
that
really do that.
except with my dad, and I rebelled against that shit.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a prank, as it were, an event that I was involved in the 70s. And it kind of epitomizes the kind of things that people did in the 70s. In Minneapolis, we have what's called the Bloomington Strip, which is down on 494, and there's tons of hotels down there, nice hotels. I mean, they're so nice, and it was so open back in the day. We'd typically go put our swimsuits under our clothes, and we would go swimming in these hotels and use the sauna, and then put our stuff back on and leave. You could never do that now. But while we were doing that, some of my friends, some of my more um, criminal element friends, noticed, you know, look at all these fire extinguishers. Now, they weren't like the chemical fire extinguishers, they were the metal cans. And basically, what you did is you put water in them and then you took them to an air pump and pumped them up full of air so they had pressure. I wasn't involved in this part of it, but a bunch of my friends stole about 10 of those fire extinguishers. Okay. 10 of them. Um, we thought, well, this is cool. What can we do with these fire extinguishers? So we filled them all up with water and air, and these fuckers would shoot like 60 feet. They were pretty powerful when they shoot them. So I'm 16, 17 years old. So my friends and I get together. I have an old station wagon. I got my dad's old car. One of my friends has a station wagon. So we pile um, five, six guys in each car, all armed with full and charged fire extinguishers, and we go start spraying motherfuckers everywhere. One friend of mine pulled up to these girls and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And they come over to the car and they get out. They run away because they see what's happening. One leaves a purse. My friend stucks the hose in there, fills that fucking purse up. Not a nice guy. We had a Dairy Queen that in the summer had a long line, a long single file line getting to the Dairy Queen. There was an alley one side and a parking on the other side. We had two cars going in opposite direction and sprayed every one of those motherfuckers. Every one of them. We were having fun. We weren't getting caught. No big deal. So one day I'm over by the Riverview Theater, which is close to my house at the time. And I see this guy obviously high, sitting on the bus stop. And I say to my girlfriend, I go, "Hey, go hit on that guy, talk to him a little bit." So we're just kind of laying low, and she's talking to him and stuff, and he looks up and he's out of it. And then five of us hit him with the fire extinguisher and literally blow him off the bench. Literally blow him off the bench. Ha ha, that's funny. We take off. Only problem is somebody got my license plate and the cops found out about it. Now, you have to understand what the cops did at this point. We have the liaison in my school, the cop liaison, and he calls up my mom and he says, "Your kid was doing this in this car. They blew this kid off the bench and they may have blinded him.
Really?
Well, they were presuming there were some chemicals in these things. And I look at my mom, it's water. Nobody got blinded, but we're freaking out for a whole day until the cop comes to my house. Okay. The cop comes to my house and it's the liaison from the high school. And he starts talking about this shit. And he looks at us, and this is how the 70s go. He looks at us, he goes, I know you guys aren't bad kids. I know you're not bad kids. Here's what I could do. If you could somehow get all the fire extinguishers together and return them to the hotels, we could probably let this thing go. I said, well, what about the blind kid? He goes, oh, he's not blind. He's not, that never happened. They were just trying to scare you. I go, oh, you motherfuckers. I said, he was stoned, though. He may be blind because he's stoned. So we were off the hook for endangering somebody. But for a whole day, we worried about this shit. I was nervous. So I say, we could probably do that. Let me see what I can get together, knowing I have 5 fucking fire extinguishers sitting in the garage at that moment. But I'm not giving them up yet. So I'm going. I'm freaking out, and I call my friend who stole these things, and I said, "Dude," he said, "before you even say anything, I got to tell you, the fucking cops called me." I go, "The cops called you too?" He goes, "Yeah, they fucking called me." I said, "The liaison guy, the Minneapolis cop?" He said, "No, motherfucker, the Bloomington cops. They found out that we were stealing the shit." And I said, well, I got caught for blowing a guy off a bench. You got caught for stealing it. And I said, what did they tell you? He said, if we can get all the shit back together and return it, they'll give us a slap on the hand and we'll be cool. I said, well, I got 5 of them. You got 5 of them. How about you come pick up my 5, go bring them back to the people that are mad at you, and then we'll call it a day. And that's exactly what happened. We got two police departments. We're blowing people out off benches and getting them wet. I mean, we went through a whole summer getting everybody wet, and by just returning those things, they let us off the hook. That would never happen today.
Yeah, you would probably get charged with felony assault for that kind of shit nowadays.
Oh hell yeah! Oh hell yeah!
You didn't worry about somebody being bigger than you, tracking you down and kicking your ass. That would have been my thing. It was like,
Oh no! We were 17,
who
16 or
cares?
17 or so in the high school. We were part of the cool crowd. We were fucking immortal. We thought we could kick everybody's ass anyway, so we weren't worried about that. Well, there's another aspect of that too. When it comes to spraying people, who we decided to spray came into the same thing. My kids, when they were little, they said, did you ever lose a fight in high school or in school, middle school and high school? I said, I never lost a fight. And they said, you must have been pretty tough. I said, no, I just knew who not to fuck with. I didn't fuck with people who kick my ass. I made friends with those motherfuckers. So when you're deciding to spray people, you don't spray people that are going to run you down on a motorcycle and beat your ass.
I can remember, growing up in a private school, and I think there were maybe 75 to 100 kids total. You know what I mean, in this school. And my dad never wanted to send me to public school because he said that it's a bad influence. Even though he sends me to a private school that's in bed, that connected to a children's home where they send the children's home to.
Yeah.
So some of the worst kids ever. And I remember not really seeing any fights there, but when I moved up to San Antonio, and there was always these fights that, so and so is going to fight so and so. And it's like all the kids knew about it. I mean, the adults had no fucking clue what was going to happen. They'll meet us over here or whatever. And I kind of learned my lesson. I was a freshman and I learned my lesson about, that, so and so is going to fight Johnny at the, they're kind of between the, the elementary school and the high school. I had a buddy of mine, Troy, that was there, and he's talking a lot of shit. And so we're all walking after school to where the fight's at. Well, they're fighting and stuff like that, and all of a sudden the counselors and principals show up. And my buddy Troy is wearing a red shirt, and all I see is this fucking little red dot just fucking hauling ass. I'm like, motherfucker, I thought you were gonna back up your boy, man. Fuck that, dude. I'm gonna hell no. But it's like they do that now. I mean, hell, nowadays they'll shoot each other. I mean, you'll fucking get,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like the Wild West again, fucking meet high noon and shit, draw first and shit. But I mean, it's the craziest thing I ever did was a prank that, it didn't have anybody involved, but it was, you look back on it and you realize how fucking stupid you were.
Yeah.
I
I've
actually
got plenty
went,
of
this,
those.
this is actually going, I went to Austin probably in the early 90s to see Aerosmith. And we're driving back and we're on a road that's, dark and, no cars, nothing like that. And my buddy goes, "You want to do a Chinese fire drill?" I'm like, "What the fuck is a Chinese fire drill?" And he told me what it was. I mean, you've heard this before. You get your car
Yeah.
and you stop it, turn off all your fucking lights, and run around the car a couple times.
All right.
I mean, and there could be, I mean, luckily there was no traffic coming, but I mean, have you ever heard of the Darwin Awards?
The what?
About how the Darwin Awards? The Darwin
Darwin.
Award,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
is like, it awards people for driving in the most stupid way, the way they
Yeah.
die. That's shit like that you sit there and you do something stupid like that. They say youth is wasted on young, and and I've known quite a few people that have died doing stupid shit. But I mean, it's that whole survival of the fittest, and the Darwin way to it. But doing shit like that, a semi could have come up behind you and hit you. I mean, just dumb shit like that. But it was a
What?
different
Yeah. Regarding the Chinese fire drill, this was in the 2000s, and things were becoming more inappropriate and appropriate things to say. There were a lot of inappropriate things said back in the day. But I was a traffic reporter, okay? And I had a guy that would fill in for me on a regular basis. And I'm driving around a car, I'm off that day, and I'm hearing the guy who's filling in for me. And you get people stopping on the freeway because they're stalled or there's a crash, and people get out of the cars, which is unsafe. But for whatever reason, this car is stopped in the freeway. People get out and they change driver to passenger. And so this guy, not being too smart, says, "Yeah, we got a car stopped in the left lane. Looks like they're doing a Chinese fire drill." Now, doing that on the radio, on a public radio station, that caused a lot of heat. People gave him shit. It's amazing to me that people, when they go on the radio or television, they don't think before they open their mouth because in spite of how much I swear, I never got caught swearing on the air. It was like a switch I was able to turn. But in terms of stupid things, I wanted to mention this because of all the stupid shit I did. And some I got caught for, some I didn't. When my kids were finally out of high school, they did what a lot of kids do. They're going to now tell you all the crazy things they did that you didn't know about while they were doing it. Um, you know, I think my mom knew about it before I got out of high school. She just said, "Just call me and let me know you're alive." She there was not much she could do. But my sons would sit down and they would tell me all these crazy things they would do. And I'd have to feign shock. I go, "Oh my God, you did that?" But under my breath, I'm saying to myself, "You fuckers are pussies. You haven't done shit." My God, thank God for that. Thank God you haven't done the things I've done. But when they were in the 2000s and they were doing what they were doing, or late 90s, early 2000s, they just couldn't get away with the shit we got away with. And I'm thankful for that because I can't imagine what kind of hell I put my mom through.
Don't you kind of think that that's kind of the way why things aren't as good as they used to be? Like you don't have your risk takers so much anymore. Like
Yeah.
everything is like with music, you don't have an up and coming artist that can start from the beginning. Like Taylor Swift did that. She did that to where she started playing like parking lots and state fairs and stuff like that. But now you have somebody. A lot of times they get their record company because of the way they look. It's not the talent. I mean, that's always been the
Oh,
case. I mean, that's always been the case.
yeah.
But
Yeah. When I I had a kid that was incredibly talented, but he didn't have the look, and he was hard. It was hard to get in place with anything. The look and the gimmick or the image was almost more important than the music itself. Well, we'll create some bullshit music. You got to look good.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that happened also in the 80s. That was a lot of it too. You had,
Yeah,
well, you always had boy bands. I mean, you look at the Monkees. I mean, they were a manufactured band, but you know, um,
it was basically taking off an original. What I mean by that is like when Elvis came out and he's playing black music. That was fucking cutting edge, and everybody was appalled by it. We've got Beatles coming across. They got the long hair and they're doing what they're doing. Every legacy or a legendary artist did something that people didn't expect. Rolling Stones, they thought, well, they'd be the next Beatles, but they were the antithesis of the Beatles. You had Bob Dylan, a guy with messy hair and a fucking and a harmonica and a guitar, and he couldn't sing. Who's gonna fucking buy that? Well, those are the people. Those are the people that make the music, and then people try to say, oh, okay, that makes money, so I'm going to try to recreate that, and that's what they do. That's what they did with the Monkees.
yeah, they did that with the Monkees. But I mean, hell, what's his name still touring? He's the only one left, but he's still touring.
Mickey
Um,
Dolenz.
yeah, he's still. I got a advertisement for him playing here in San Antonio, and he's the only one left. Is
Wow.
his one? Is his mom the one that invented whiteout? Was it his mom or was it the other guy?
No, that was Mike Nesmith.
Yeah, I mean, God, you talk about a fucking invention. But yeah, I just don't think stuff is authentic. But I also kind of think, and the generation too, is that I think also there was some kind of study gone that you really lose interest in music in your like mid 30s. Like you don't really have it was some kind of age that where you don't really appreciate new music like you used to. I mean, my God, I remember in like the 80s when something new came out. Hey, it's coming out. It's great. The new album's coming out. But you get older and stuff, and I think you get more set in your ways. Like I don't really listen to new music, and I don't really listen to new music by the bands I like. I
Yeah,
mean and I think I used to DJ a few years ago, like weddings and stuff like that. And the worst thing is when you have an artist that's like in their 60s trying to re-record something they did in their 20s.
right.
I mean, that like you would go to Walmart back when you bought physical media like CDs, and you'd really have to look because you'd buy an album. Oh, this has a lot of good songs on it, but it's re-recorded. I think I think anybody that re-records should be death penalty should be enacted because I think it's
With
that
one
bad.
with one exception. With one exception.
Who
Taylor Swift. Remember
I
what she did?
Yeah,
She
I don't know
lost
her
all
music that well.
she lost all her right. Somebody stole her rights to all her songs, publishing and all the stuff. So she just recreated the same song so she could own them.
Yeah, but it wasn't
It's
like it was a 30-year difference either. I mean,
no, it wasn't. Um, that's true about the being in the 30s, and I think there's another reason for it. 70s, I'm in my teens. That's all I care about is music and having fun. 80s, I'm in my young 20s into my late 20s. Now I'm getting married, having kids in the late 80s into the 90s. And by the time I'm in the 90s and I'm in my 30s, I got kids, I got a job, I got all this. I don't have time to fucking listen to music. I'm if I listen to music, it's going to be the stuff that reminds me of high school and college days. So I think there is something to be said about it. I think it has more to do with timing than it does interest. Um, and of course, the other aspect is we're getting older, and all these young people coming out with this crazy fucking music that you just don't get. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, there are some things about rap I like, but generally I didn't get it. I didn't think it was necessarily bad. I mean, the only thing in the 70s I did not get and I did not appreciate and I still don't get it is punk music,
yeah.
because punk music was was the antithesis of like Prince or the antithesis of the Beatles, because it was a bunch of kids that couldn't play instruments, that couldn't sing, that couldn't write, and that was the fucking point.
Well, I think also that punk goes hand in hand with a lot of grunge bands. because you were coming out of the 80s where everything was so polished that I think almost, I mean, probably like the 70s too with punk. There was that kind of, tiredness of it all. Like people were
Yeah.
tired of the glam band, glam metal bands, and a lot of your bands, even like Motley Crue, they in '94 they fired their lead singer and got another guy. And to me, and to a lot of, I mean, they were playing like the arenas a few years earlier, back like in '89. I saw them in '94. They were playing some little outside venue theater because
Yeah.
they rock had lost so much of its shit. But to a
Right.
lot of us, I mean, I like that. I mean, I didn't give up on those bands that I grew up with just because they got a little bit harder edge. But I think punk was a reflection of that. I think grunge and alternative was of that. But I think also metal, kind of with new metal in the '90s. I know this isn't really your thing, but you have bands like Marilyn Manson and Korn that got tired of that a lot of that Debbie Downer music, and a lot of grunge was
Yeah.
that way. You had Marilyn Manson just doing what Alice Cooper did 20 years ago up to another level. And then you started having that whole rebellion thing to where they started blaming the music, like for Columbine, because those artists listened, those people that did it listened to Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what they did with Judas Priest, saying that, they talk about, well, they were smoking dope and then they listened to Priest. Okay, the smoking dope doesn't have anything to do with it, just the music. So it's like
Yeah.
everything is new again. And I think that is, yeah, I don't like punk. I Green Day, they're considered punk, but they got some good songs. But like the Sex Pistols, the Misfits, I tried. I really did, but you're right. It's like me and you going out there and, not playing our guitars and everything and, singing about how life sucks. I mean, to me, that's what punk was. But I mean, it did have a movement, but it just doesn't seem very happy. And I like, Bob Ross, Happy Little Trees. It's like music's my escape. It's not I don't want to be tortured.
Call me old fashioned, but when it comes to music, I like a little something we know as a fucking melody,
Yeah.
something that I can get hooked on. The whole grunge thing. Now, I was in my 30s. That was the 90s, right? It was the 90s. And Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. And everybody was so enthralled with Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, and they're comparing them to the Beatles, and they're so great. I never got it. Yeah, he had a couple hit songs. They were okay. I don't understand the draw to it though. I mean, they're probably good musicians. The songs were okay, but the whole vibe about it was pretty, like you say, pretty much a downer. And I have one rule of thumb when it comes to concerts, music, or movies. I don't care what the critics say. If I go in and I pay my money and I feel good and I feel satisfied for whatever I was looking for when I come out, it was fucking good, whether anybody else thinks it's good or not. I want to go there to be entertained. And if I'm entertained, then I won.
I I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Nirvana. I think they're the most overrated band of all time next to Pink Floyd. I will put that on my tombstone, but I don't like either. I would pick Nirvana above Pink Floyd. I never got Pink Floyd, and I think we both agree on that. Or did you
Yeah,
agree?
I agree. And I came up in the era when Pink Floyd was hot, the 60s, 70s, and 80s and stuff. And there were some songs I liked, The Wall, that whole era, Money, Money. But for the most part, I didn't get Pink Floyd. It was too, it seemed esoteric for me. It seemed a little more abstract. And my taste in music is much simpler. I like a good beat. I like a good melody. I like a good story in the lyrics. That's why, even though I'm not a country music fan, there are a lot of country music songs I like because they embody all those things.
Yeah, Nirvana, I say a love-hate relationship. As I get older, I kind of appreciate them more, I guess, because they're not really around. But when they call Kurt Cobain the voice of Generation X, that's bullshit. I mean, Nirvana was good, and Nirvana was good, but they weren't great. Pearl Jam is great. Alice in Chains is great. You have some grunge bands that are better than that because I mean, but it's also your idea what you define as great. We
Right.
sit here, we don't like Pink Floyd, but to some people they rule the fucking moon. I mean, it's music. That's why I never, when they talk about, the greatest band of all time, To me, my personal opinion, the greatest band of all time, and it's maybe not all music, it's staying power. That's the Stones. The Stones far outweighed the Beatles. I think the Beatles were a flash compared to the Stones. The Stones are still around, but that's my opinion. You know,
Yeah,
I think the Stones are the greatest rock and roll band of all time is because not just the music, but it's also the influence, the longevity, and stuff like that. But, I don't like Pink Floyd, I don't like Nirvana, but that doesn't mean they suck. I mean, it's hell, I listen to a band that dresses up like clowns. I mean,
yeah.
everything's subjective. And that's why, when you say the top 10, that's your top 10, and it's, like we're sitting here and we don't know an artist maybe besides Taylor Swift that's going to be around 20, 30 years. But there could
Yeah.
be somebody out there that is. And I would love to hear it in the comments and we could talk about it. Come on, come on the show and give that younger perspective of somebody. I mean, hell, I'm open to hear. I mean, I'll give something a try.
Of that same era, when people think of Minneapolis, where I'm from, with music, you think Prince, The Time, Andre Simone, all that R&B stuff, Maserati, and all that stuff, and that is an important part of it. But there was some kind of alt or grunge or whatever punk, certainly punk music coming out of Minnesota, and there are three acts that came out of Minnesota that I never really, well, two acts I never really got. First of all, and people say some people say this is the greatest band ever. It's the Replacements. Now, the Replacements were big for a short period of time, but these people were just absolutely fucked up drug wise, mentally. I think they got kicked off of SNL, but people loved the Replacements. There's another group called Husker Du, which was interesting. Husker Du was a board game you saw promoted in the 60s and 70s during Christmas to sell to kids. But Husker Du had this Bob Mould guy. He was kind of a heavy set guy. He was a singer. People think that was the absolute most amazing band ever. And Bob's still doing some shit too, and he's still well thought of. But I never got that. The one I kind of got, because I like one or two of their songs, because that may be all they have, was Soul Asylum.
Hmm.
Soul Asylum came out of Minneapolis. I think it's David Perner. So we had some different kinds of music coming out of Minneapolis all around the time of Prince and all that other stuff. Um, but there was kind of a punk and a grunge scene in Minneapolis, and I never got into it because I was probably a little too old at the time.
I like Soul Asylum. That's a band, and I give the credit to David because he had Winona Ryder in her prime. So he gets an award for that because they were engaged. This is after she jumped Johnny Depp. But they had a song called "Runaway Train," which was about kids like, and they were talking about human trafficking back, before, like those kids on the milk cartons, missing kids. And if you ever watch the video, it's about a girl out there with her baby, and this older woman comes and steals the baby from her, and they have like signs of like these kids that disappeared and stuff. And they actually found a couple kids because of that.
Yeah.
And they also have a song. This is how the 90s were as compared to the 80s. When they had I want somebody to love. Well, they had a song, I want somebody to shove, and so yeah, I've heard him. They're still around. I like Soul Asylum. I didn't know they were from Minnesota. But talking
Did,
about
didn't it, didn't they do that one song that's the standard for every bar too? Didn't they do Closing Time?
no, that was a band called that wasn't them. I know who you're talking.
Soundgarden, maybe? Maybe that's what that makes.
No, no, that wasn't them. That was a one-hit wonder. I know because I played that when I used to do DJing at the gigs. It's a one-hit wonder.
Semisonic.
Semisonic, yeah. Yep. Yeah, that was a one hit wonder. Yeah, a lot of those bands sounded the same. So, we're talking about the
You know, by
70s.
the way, by the way, Semisonic, also from Minneapolis. Just saying.
Well, I
Go
want to
ahead.
mention a band from Texas.
Okay.
Probably my favorite band from Texas. Can you imagine the fucking shitstorm if this was released today? When you're driving down the highway at night and you're feeling that wild turkey's bite, don't give Johnny Walker a ride because Jack Blade is right by your side. You might get taken to the jailhouse and find you've been arrested by driving while blind. I mean, you talk about earth-breaking, Grammy award-winning lyrics. That's ZZ Top, arrested while driving blind, 1976. Can you
ZZ Top.
Okay, he says now, okay, now we just another night with nothing to do. We broke a case of proof 102. I mean, God, I mean, just talk about drinking and driving. You know,
Yeah,
it's you know, I mean, it's like you said, man. I mean, you got that cop that wasn't a dick about it. I remember back in the 80s, DWIs were nothing. You just pay a lawyer $1,000, you get off. I mean, and
yeah,
rightfully
yeah,
so. You had the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And I remember, you know who Slash is from Guns N' Roses, right?
yeah,
He had a shirt he wore in the 80s called Damn Drunks Against Mad Mothers. I mean, can you imagine
yeah.
if that, I mean, it was a simpler time. And I mean, I know we've kind of gone down we've gone back in time on stuff like that about how the good old days were. And I know we're getting close to the end here, but I'd like to ask you, Mike, before we go, is there anything you're watching on TV right now or listening to, reading that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I just watched something. I binged watched a limited series, um, and it's because I really enjoy biographies and historical things. Um, Hold on a second here. I just want to make sure I have all the information. It's a show called Death by Lightning, um, and it's a movie about it's a movie about James Garfield, who was a president of the United States, who ended up winning, and it was kind of a surprise thing. He didn't expect to be in this position, but he did.
Sound familiar?
And he was shot by some crazy guy, like 3 months into his term. He died like 6 months later. He died 9 months into it, but it is Death by Lightning, and it's a great movie. And the guy that's in it, who is the guy that's in it? Hold on, he's a famous actor.
Well, it's got a couple of them. It's
Uh,
got the guy from Parks and Recreation.
yeah, yeah, Mike. Yeah, Nick Offerman plays Chester A. Arthur.
And it's got that guy
Uh,
that he was also in Boardwalk Empire. He's a
Michael Shannon.
yeah, Michael
He
Shannon.
plays he plays James Garfield. Bradley Whitford's in it. It's actually, if you like historical stuff, especially stuff you've never heard of, because I never knew the story of James Garfield or how this all played out. It's well done, well acted. It's interesting. It's 4 episodes, so you can binge watch it in a night.
Yeah, I've been there's a girl on TikTok that's like a historian was talking about this, and yeah, I really want to see that. It kind of reminds me of those like we talked about, looking at pictures and watching movies is almost like time traveling back to the time that happened. Well, I like what I'm doing right now is I'm listening to a audiobook by Charlie Sheen.
Oh yeah,
You want to talk about a fucking charmed life? We talk about a guy that's lucky to be alive. But he talks about growing up with his dad, of course, and his brother Emilio Estevez, and just about how they would, go from town to town, when depending on Martin Sheen's acting credentials. But haven't got to the good stuff yet, the 80s and, the winning part of his life and everything like that. But yeah, Charlie Sheen, yeah, he's got a documentary, I think, also on Netflix that came out too. And there's also one on Netflix I saw with Eddie Murphy that I actually want to watch too. He talks about how he paid for James Brown's and Red Fox's funeral. I guess they
yeah,
both died broke, and he ended up paying for them and stuff. But yeah, a lot of good stuff coming out, and it's all that stuff when you watch it. I think it's kind of nice to watch the Garfield thing because it predates it. We're not watching documentaries on eras we lived through. So it kind of
Yeah.
makes you feel.
I mean, I do like watching documentaries of eras I've lived through, especially like the 60s, because I was too little to know really what was going on, but I was there. So it's kind of interesting. But this Garfield thing is intriguing. There's a lot more to the story than you'd imagine. And it was basically some crazy stalker, goofball guy that never did anything right who ended up shooting him, um, and thinking he was going to get famous because he shot him. Up until the moment they put him in the noose, he thought he was going to, at the very least, be remembered fondly. And then at that moment, he realizes, yeah, I'm fucked.
And
Kind
they
of,
s-
it's kind of satisfying.
and they say when they shot Garfield, I read some of it that he wouldn't have died if they just would have left him alone because the bullet didn't really hit any kind of internal organs to where he would have damaged him, but they kept fucking with him, I guess, and that's what eventually killed him.
You got sepsis. Yeah,
Yeah, because
exactly.
it was right before they started washing their hands and shit. You would think that people would know that, you know. You would fucking kind of like, hey, smoking can kill you, inhaling smoke can kill you. Who know? Who would fucking
Well,
know?
well, the interesting thing about the show is soon after he's shot, a doctor steps up, but he happens to be black.
Mm.
And they go, no, he's the president. You're not touching him. So he says, well, if I don't touch him, he ain't going to be around. So he starts working on him. And this white doctor comes up and then starts working on him, pushes the black guy aside. And he's digging around and doing the stuff. And the black doctor says, I was just at a conference in France. They were talking about the viruses and and the bacteria and stuff. And we got to be careful of this and that. And the white doctor looks at him and the white doctor looks at him and says, this is real medical care. We're not talking about boogeymen that we can't see. So he just keeps doing what he does. And of course, when it all ends up that he dies of sepsis, um, one of the last things that white doctor says is, I think we made a mistake. Yeah, motherfucker, you made a mistake. You just killed the president.
See, that's the
And it
difference.
seemed like Garfield was a decent guy, too.
Yeah.
Seemed like he was a decent person.
Yeah, the difference between now and then is that that doctor would have admitted they were wrong, unlike hey, don't take Tylenol.
Yeah,
We're gonna
absolutely.
wrap up this episode of Taking a Break with Gen X Jason and Boomer 2, and we hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.
We will see you next time. Thanks for joining us on Taking a Break.